assure you that the expression Son of Man, like spiritual, has a variety of meanings, not just one or even two. And fairness, but more than that, in Matthew chapter 20, verse 28, Jesus says that the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life as a ransom for many. Now you may want to say, well, you can give your life in diligent service. It doesn't necessarily mean give your life in death. But you go a bit farther and find Jesus as he talks about the beginning of the Lord's Supper, the Eucharist, the communion, whatever you wish to call it. He takes the cup and he said, "This cup is my blood of the new covenant, which is poured out for many for the remission of sins." Jesus intended to give his life a ransom for many by pouring out his blood. Again, looking at some Muslim interpreters of the Quran, they did not kill him, they did not crucify him, it only seemed that they did so. The interpretation of that particular passage often carries the idea that in fact the Romans and the Jews were deceived, that they thought they crucified Jesus, but in fact they did not. They crucified someone else. Well, who deceived them? Were they just ignorant, just foolish? Or was it something of a movement of God to protect his prophet? If it was God acting to protect his prophet, what kind of a God is that, to foist such a hoax on so much of the world? And were the disciples deceived? And if they were deceived, by whom were they deceived? Sheer ignorance, or by God? Who wasn't deceived when it came to this matter of the crucifixion and the death of Jesus? It seems like everybody was. And if everybody was, then once again, what happens to God, who is concerned to reveal his message for humankind in and through a prophet like Jesus, who thus is defeated from the very outset because the Romans and the Jews are deceived, and the Christians must have been also. Either they were deceived or they were dishonest. They knew better, but they deliberately and willfully and maliciously wrote that he died when he hadn't. Mr. Deedat at the very outset pointed to a difference between Christianity and Islam in terms of the concepts of sin. Original sin, he referred to, an idea that has a half a dozen different interpretations in Christian circles. Christians are not agreed about the meaning of all of the implications of original sin. But Christians are agreed in their understanding that what the Bible is saying, the Holy Book is saying, is that human beings are sinful, and that that sinfulness involves more than simply a mistake. That there is something fundamentally wrong with humankind as the consequence of the choice that people made in rebellion against God that brought a serious consequence with it, so that people are bent out of shape. The evidence? I think Scripture and human experience. I mean, how many of you, if you would be honest, in the depths of your heart, in the quiet of your night when you're alone, can actually deal with and overcome those tendencies within you toward self-centeredness, toward pride, toward lust, and on the list would go. And I think in a moment of honesty, most all of us would admit, no. We are not able through our own energies nor through ritual to overcome those things. Why? Because of the doctrine set forth in the Holy Book regarding the nature of sin. Why the crucifixion? Well, let me put it in this kind of context. The crucifixion, in some ways, is a question of honor. A question of the honor of God. Now, the book of Leviticus in the Old Testament says that if a man sleeps with his mother, he brings dishonor on his father, and he should be put to death. If a man sleeps with his sister, he brings dishonor on his family, and he should be put to death. And in the New Testament, Jesus, quoting from the prophet Isaiah, speaking of the Jewish people of his day, says, "These people honor me with their lips only, but their heart is far from me." You see, it is possible to honor God with one's lips and yet at the same time dishonor God. How does one deal with dishonor when it comes to pass? Well, may I suggest to you it's not through ritual. You who are Muslims, think of your home countries. Think of the views that many people in your societies have. A daughter, a sister, slips out of the house unaccompanied and meets a young man on the street corner, and they talk, or walk, or hold hands, or touch, or have sex. A disgrace. And so the girl comes home having been discovered, and she says, "Father, brother, family, I'm sorry." And they say, "That's all right. Forget it." You know better than that. You know that you do not remove dishonor brought on the family of a serious nature by someone merely saying, "Oh, I'm sorry," and someone else saying, "Forget it." What about the honor of God? When the honor of God has been offended, when you and I have brought shame on the very God who made us, what is to be done? Do you mean that we stand and say, "God, I'm sorry"? Or that we perform some sort of external ritual? Or that we even come with our heart and say, "With all of my heart, I'm sorry," and I perform this ritual? No. God intervenes at that point, and here is the miracle of miracles. Jesus said in John 15, "Greater love has no man than this, that he lay down his life for his friends. And I now call you my friends." And so God sends Jesus as the one who will step in between, who will deal with the issue of the dishonor that we have brought on God by making amends, by dying